All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started with our first panel. So again, if you're just joining us, welcome back to day 2 of the 2021 RDAP Summit. And we are going to start off with our third panel today, collective data projects. And I am going to hand off the mic to Tess, our moderator for the panel session, to get us started.
Thanks, Reed. I'm just going to go over some housekeeping items before we jump into the panel. So we are recording the Zoom webinar, so attendees are muted and attendee cameras are turned off, same as yesterday. So to ask questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. You can upvote questions there as well. The session will run to the top of the hour, with the last 15 minutes dedicated for Q&A. We also have a Discord server set up for more informal conversations running throughout the summit, and continued conversations brought up during the presentation. Throw that link there in the chat. And the Research Data Access and Preservation Summit organizers are committed to providing an environment where all attendees can participate fully in the program and activities without fear of harassment or discriminatory behavior of any kind. As such, our Code of Conduct helpers, Amy and Laura, are available as panelists during the session. For the full code of conduct and links to the incident form and the code of conduct helper email, please visit our code of conduct page. And I'll put that link in the chat as well. The first of our 3 presentations today comes from Maria Pretzelis. Maria Pretzelis is a product manager at the California Digital Library, where she manages the DMP tool as well as the Fair Island project. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Maria, and I'll ask all the other panelists to please turn off your video, and Maria, go ahead and share your screen.
All righty, thank you. Here we go. All right, hopefully my Wi-Fi does all right with this. So I am going to give you our no-nonsense practical guide to implementing effective data practices. So this presentation came out of a National Science Foundation funded conference that CDL organized with ARL, AAU, and APLU. So the 4 organizations have been sort of long and very deeply committed to advancing open science and open science practices. So we all came together as organizations to kind of continue this work in a collective manner. So just a quick shout out to our awesome team of folks who worked on this project. A number of these are regular RDAPers, so you'll probably see some familiar names, and I haven't looked at the list, so I don't know if anybody's in this session, but you'll probably bump into some while you're at RDAP. So the project began with a conference that we held in December of 2019. We had about 40 participants. They were invited from a number of different stakeholder groups. So we had folks from US federal agencies, federal funders, private funding organizations, research IT, vice chancellors for research, professional societies, repository managers, tool builders like myself, data librarians, and of course, can't forget the actual researchers themselves. So the participants were thinking about and discussing what barriers currently exist for implementing good data practices. We talked a lot about what model workflows might look like to support effective data management, and really try to hone in on what would be some core recommendations for effective data practices for specific stakeholder groups. So a lot of really meaty questions that have been sort of important to the community for quite some time. So it was a real great experience to gather so many sort of leaders in this space and pose these questions to the group. So after this 1.5 day long conference, the project team came back and reassembled, and sort of looked at all of our notes from the workshop and set up some draft guidelines coming out of the workshop. We submitted those for feedback to the original participants, and then we also sent it to folks who weren't able to attend the original workshop session. So we were really looking at the same stakeholder group, being library leaders, campus IT folks, senior research offices, tool builders. So those are the folks that were really involved in creating these recommendations, and they were the same folks that we actually tried to target in terms of the actual recommendations themselves. So our goal as a team, like the title of this talk, was really to have very practical, concrete, action-oriented recommendations that people could actually implement at their host organizations. So everything that I'm going to talk about today and the report is available on the ARL website on that URL there. After my talk, I will post it, I'll put it into the chat as well. So our project, including the conference and the reports, and the toolkit, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, really came out of this NSF Dear Colleague letter, which was very important to those of us who are working in this space. The letter established two important practices for effective data management. The first being persistent identifiers for data sets, and the second being creating machine readable or active data management plans. So PIDs really form the core of our reports, and they are, really important because they are our best means to connect the elements of scholarship and to really utilize machine actionable data management plans. So our report recommended 5 specific PIDs to be implemented, those being ORCIDs for individuals, ROARs for research for organizations, the new Crossref grant ID, publications and data using DOIs, and the Crossref funder registry for funding source. So machine actionable DMPs are the second piece of the Dear Colleague letter and our work here. And we've talked about machine actionable data management plans for a number of years, but for those who are new to this conversation, we're basically talking about transforming that static 2-page PDF file into a structured document, utilizing controlled vocabularies, identifiers, so that we can take that information and share it across stakeholders so that we can create things like real-time reporting, notifications, automated compliance checking. So this new structure, if we build it correctly, really should lessen the administrative burden on researchers because that information follows them in an automated way throughout the research process. So our recommendations in this report are grouped by stakeholder, as I mentioned, and represented in this pyramid here. So starting at the base, really the standards around PIDs and machine actionable data management plans, really came out of the research community, the research data community, specifically a lot of work being done at RDA from folks deeply involved in identifiers and machine actionable data management plans. So as these standards gets embraced and developed, they are then become incorporated and required from government and funder policies with things like the NSF Dear Colleague letter. So as those things happen, the tool builders and publishers then can modify their platforms and their tools and services to support that. So the area of the stakeholder pyramid that we really focused on and we thought was, really important to supporting researchers themselves was this support arms. So these are sort of the library staff, research IT, research offices. And what we were really found from talking with folks and really thinking and looking at this is that the more open the systems are amongst all of these stakeholder groups and the more collaboratively we build this new ecosystem, the better it supports those at the top of the pyramid. And so ultimately best supporting the researchers themselves and really creating systems and workflows that are efficient and really implementable for researchers. I'm not going to go into these recommendations specifically. There's a lot of them. I pulled it out here just to give you a sense of what the report looks like. So it is again organized by stakeholder. So this is just a snapshot of the key recommendations for academic and research libraries. Each stakeholder would have a similar but different set of recommendations. So we really tried to make them action-oriented and very specific and very doable. So to support people in having the conversations that really are needed in order to implement these recommendations, we created a lightweight communications toolkit that is based on the report and our recommendations. So everything in this toolkit is totally customizable, reusable for your institution. So it includes the presentation slides, all of our handouts, discussion questions, the reading list that we put together to help sort of prime participants in some background regarding how these practices had emerged in the field. And we also have some really great interviews. There are video recordings where we interviewed some specific stakeholders, and there's some great little clips there of folks talking about the importance of these practices and how it would affect their communities specifically. So everything in the toolkit is CC BY, and we hope it's going to be useful to people in facilitating really the conversations that are needed in order to implement these practices. So just here, an example of the shareable slides that you can customize. So they have things like the specific value proposition for a recommendation, the recommendations themselves, so that you could really target it based on the community that you're talking to at the time. Of course, using that opportunity to also include your own local information about where people could get more information on these practices at your local institution. So just these are the handouts, some of the handouts that we have included, as well as the reading list and the key takeaways from the report. So the toolkit also includes discussion questions, really designed to aid local discussions with a specific stakeholder. So in this case, if you were talking with researchers, here are some examples of things that you might want to use to facilitate a conversation. So finally, I wanted to just close up by talking just briefly about the work we're continuing to do, specifically at CDL, sort of furthering implementing these best practices for research data. So I work specifically with the DMP tool, where basically what we've done is we've got to the point where we have transformed that static 2-page PDF file into a structured document utilizing controlled vocabularies. And our next step is to really hook it into the larger PID ecosystem as recommended in this report. So really creating a new next generation networked DMP that can hook into the larger ecosystem of research data through using identifiers. So we have a big upcoming DMP tool release. Those of you who are DMP tool admins know that we are going to be doing a webinar to demo these new features in a few weeks, and I expect to actually release the new version at the middle or end of April. So we are actively working towards realizing a lot of the recommendations that are put forth in this report, and really helping to support the community to push that best practices forward as well. So that is it for me. If anybody wants to talk networked DMPs or anything like that, always please email me and I'm happy to chat.
Thank you, Maria. I'm really excited about this communication toolkit and the new DMP tool to release. I think these are going to be great upgrades, and I'm really looking forward to them. So our next presenters, I should say, are going to be Cynthia Polity and Kay Bjornen. Cynthia Polity is the director of the Aurora Library, located on the Aurora campus at Tri-Institutional Campus in Denver, Colorado. And Kay Bjornen is a Research Data Initiatives Librarian at Oklahoma State University. Cynthia and Kay, take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Tess, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning or this afternoon, wherever you may be. I'm really excited to be here with my colleague Kay and to talk a little bit about our project. So this project was a research funded project by an IMLS Sparks grant, and it was during my time at Oklahoma State University. So this is kind of going a couple of years back now, but our purpose for this project was to really figure out a way to work with researchers and really integrate kind of their shared experiences and their challenges in managing research, their research data, and then figuring out how the library can play a more meaningful and deeper role in supporting that work. So, at the time when we were kind of going through this project, there had been a lot of surveys related to data management practices of researchers. And one of the things that we noticed is that while the surveys were great to kind of get some of that initial information about the practices and behaviors of researchers, they weren't perhaps going quite as much in depth as we had perhaps wanted. And so we were kind of trying to think of, well, wouldn't it be great if we could actually work with researchers to get their firsthand accounts of what they're going through as they're working through their projects, as they're collecting their data, and would that give us any additional insight into what the library can do to help support them? And so that was really kind of our main research question. What would be the impact of the library if we kind of approached it from this perspective, this more in-depth perspective? And I should say also that all of the project information is in the open science framework. So our notes, our project proposal, everything that revolves around this project is openly available for everyone to refer to, and all the links are listed in the PowerPoint here as well. So our project activities and materials consisted of three kind of phases and three different types of work with the researchers. And these were researchers that we selected based on, we try to kind of get a wide variety of researchers across the different disciplines. So trying to get both qualitative and quantitative data and trying to really get as wide a breadth and depth as possible. So there were about 30 of them that we initially reached out to. And we started with this idea of customer journey mapping, which comes more from the user experience perspective, to really help us figure out what they were going through. And so we asked each of them to fill out these maps at different points of their research project to really let them tell us what they were experiencing and thinking and feeling at each of these steps, and what were, more importantly, the challenges that they were going through as they were working with their data. Then we ended up doing some additional in-depth surveys and interviews, because we wanted to get a better sense, and we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the lessons learned. So this was sort of added on as the project went along, to get a better sense of where were the gaps from the customer journey maps that we were kind of trying to look at themes and trying to figure out, do we need to collect additional information from them? So we did go ahead and work with them to collect some additional interview data. And finally, the final part of the project consisted of us undergoing some design thinking sessions with them to really try to get at this notion of, we've identified the challenges that were expressed through these other methodologies. Now, can we work with the researchers to come up with some solutions that are not just sort of being given to them, but they're integrated alongside what the library can actually offer, and to really foster that collaborative element and that collaborative spirit. And basically what happened, and again, if you look at the OSF information, we have the actual map, so that it actually shows when the researcher was going through a particular stage of the process, what kind of data were they collecting? What were they feeling and thinking? And they actually wrote down, I'm confused, or, sort of this is what was going on at this particular point in time. And then the interviews were just specific questions based on that. And then the design thinking session just is more conversation. And so it was the idea that, let's say, we identified that they had a challenge in organizing their data. We would take that and then brainstorm some ways that the library could assist them. But again, all of this information is in those templates and that documentation. So what did we find? And I think the interesting thing with this project, as Kay is going to talk about, is not really so much the project results themselves, which I think pretty much, echo a lot of what's already been written in the literature and discussed. So it's nothing new. It was really more the process itself and the project management piece that really gave us some pause and made for some surprising elements along the way and for quite a few lessons learned. So what did we discover? That in terms of being able to share data, data sharing across platforms is a challenge, especially if you're working with colleagues from different institutions across different areas and geographical areas. That there is, it's hard to come to consensus about a consistent workflow among project collaborators, and data sharing requirements are also a challenge. Data organization. Again, nothing kind of surprising here. Version control is an issue, and especially when it comes to how data within a particular even lab or unit is being recorded and organized, and how everyone has different preferences for how the data is organized and shared out. And finally, data storage was also an issue. Not enough space, the cost, keeping different versions in different places, and again, being able to share that data easily. So all of these were sort of the broad themes that we uncovered as we were kind of going through the materials and really looking at what the researchers had told us. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kay, who's going to talk about, I think, probably the more interesting part, which is what were all the lessons learned as a result of this project.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, the lessons learned. This is a lovely case of, hindsight is 2020. And one of the things that we determined was that when we started talking to researchers, well, actually the very first step, when we started getting our templates back from our mapping process, most of what we got was incomplete, or it was stuck in one phase of the data process, the cycle, or it really was not as if, effectively collected as we wanted. And so our first realization was that what we had set up as a static template to collect this information really needed to be a real-time data collection. And in order to do that, again, with hindsight, probably the best thing to do would have been to have provided either a Google form, or have created a process where we expected reports on at least a weekly basis, perhaps even daily basis. And that would have been much, also, I think, less structure. When we set up the templates, we created boxes with, the specific questions, and between the fact that, our researchers struggled to make those questions fit what they did, and the fact that the other thing we learned was that when we selected people for the project, it was based on our idea of, they worked with data, they worked with big data. But what we discovered was, in fact, a very large number of these researchers were computational or modelers. And so they actually didn't interface with the data in the same ways that people who did, for instance, field data collection or laboratory data collection did. And because the researchers that we had were heavily weighted with the computational side of things, so we didn't get a good enough picture of what the people that did more, broader phases of the data cycle. So we felt like, if we went back and started over, we would have asked different questions about how people's research processes worked, and we would have done perhaps more customization with regard to, how we got their information and were able to, stay on top of what they did. Plus, by asking them to do the templates the way we did, we were asking them to remember, to go back and try and remember what their problems were and where they got stuck. And again, it's much easier if you're asking them in real time, because when they're, they remember it vividly when they're right in the middle of it, but, problems tend to stack on top of each other and fade into the distance once you get past them. Cynthia, you wanna? Yeah, so better documentation, clearly, and again, I feel like a form that they could have filled out would have been helpful. We also realized that we had a graduate student that we hired basically at the time on the basis of her skills with unstructured data analysis. And because that's something that I, in particular, felt I was lacking in. We really were looking for that skill set. But it turns out that, we should have asked some questions about her experience with project management. And then we should have done a better job of matching up her gaps with, with better coaching and so on, so that she was able to stay engaged and do a better job fulfilling what we needed. That was a human resources issue on our part. And we felt like we really underutilized our advisory board. We put together this awesome group of people that could have been, so helpful. And as we were struggling through, various of these realizations about, how we should have done a better job of collecting our data and so on, we found it difficult to get the advisory board together because they were all people with busy schedules. And so again, probably in hindsight, doing a better job of finding perhaps unscheduled ways to get their feedback would have been useful. But anyway, that's something we would do differently next time. And again, we have the information at the bottom there about the different project facets and our advisory board information. So what we would do differently, and if this project were to do a next phase, I think we would look at it differently. We would try to do more of almost an embedded work partnership with librarians and with our researchers, try and identify the places where the librarian could provide that expertise up front. It would help the researchers have a better idea of what to expect, and perhaps, hopefully, would make it easier for them to informally engage us when they needed us. That was something that, again, I think we started out with a very formal process, and we kind of neglected that informal communication. So I think we would do a better job of building all of our tools out with that in mind. Yeah. a better job of training our grad student and selecting our grad student on a different basis, I think we would go back to. And we hope that in the future, we would just be able to spread our partnerships out better and include some other parties that we really didn't include in this, including the research offices, the grant facilitation folks and the computing folks, and formalizing that. And with that, that's Cynthia and I's contact information, and we would be more than happy to talk with anybody who is interested in a similar project.
Thank you, Cynthia and Kay. And just a reminder to everybody that if you would like to ask a question for our presenters, please do so in the Q&A and put their name on. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our last presenter, Jeff Moon. He is the director of the Portage Network from my home country of Canada. There's been a lot of excitement about Portage in the Discord, so we look forward to your presentation. Welcome, Jeff. And Jeff, we can see your screen, but you are muted.
Yeah, I'm here now. I'm just juggling multiple screens. My apologies. Here we go. Okay, so you can hear me and see me?
Yep. You're
Okay,
all set.
good. Thanks very much. I'm here today to talk to you about radical change for RDM in Canada. And I thought I'd start out just by commenting that the closed captioning at the beginning captured the RDAP Summit as Our Doubts Summit, which I thought was rather ironic, because certainly the first two speakers that we've had today in this panel dispel any doubt in my mind about the great progress that's being made in this space. So I think it's definitely RDAP and not Our Doubts. What I'll be looking at today is a new vision for digital research infrastructure in Canada. And we'll be looking as well at the Portage Network, and I color that as RDM on the move. And we'll be going into a number of things surrounding what the Portage Network is and where it fits into that space. The big news story here is that we've launched NDRIO, the new digital research infrastructure organization in Canada. NDRIO was formed to help coalesce, coordinate, and improve digital research infrastructure for researchers in Canada. And it's a big enterprise. Prior to NDRIO, responsibility for delivering Canada's DRI, including data management, was a highly distributed playing field with many actors across multiple delivery layers. And there was really no formal mechanism to ensure coordination and planning. And data management sat there in the middle. NDRIO was created as a government-funded national not-for-profit organization to advance and invest in national DRI activities in data management, research software, and advanced research computing. One of the key value propositions of NDRIO was increasing synergies between these three key areas of DRI activity. So Portage is very excited to be the first one to move in to the new organization on April 1st, 2021. So what will Portage be bringing to the NDRIO table? Portage was launched in 2015 as an enterprise of the CARL, Canadian Association of Research Libraries, and has grown into a mature, well-respected national network of RDM support and services that consists of a network of experts across the country, training and outreach, services, policies and best practices, tools, and a number of infrastructure platforms with our partners. In addition, CARL was funded by CARL Libraries since 2015, but has been receiving government funding since 2019. And as I mentioned earlier, will be fully part of NDRIO as of the beginning of next month. Portage frames its work around the research data management lifecycle, including data planning, I should say, collecting and analyzing, publishing, depositing, and discovery and reuse. The network of experts was strategically layered over this life cycle model to provide targeted expertise and support for Canadian researchers. The network includes a DMP or data management planning expert group, a curation expert group, a sensitive data expert group, a group focused on data repositories, both multidisciplinary and discipline specific, a preservation expert group, and a discovery and metadata expert group. In addition to this, we've added a research intelligence expert group, which looks at metrics and keeps its eye on the overarching DRI and RDM landscape, but also a national training expert group. In all, we have 140 experts from over 60 organizations and many different types of stakeholders from those organizations. The network of experts and the various expert groups have been very busy doing work surrounding development of a national training strategy, launching a new Dmp Assistant, which I'll talk about in a minute, preservation pipeline project, piloting preservation processing, Core Trust Seal certification pilot for repositories, development of a national curation support network and a survival guide, improving discovery and a project targeting access limited metadata, making sure that those kinds of data are exposed and discoverable, continued metrics gathering and surveilling ecosystem, and addressing practical needs surrounding sensitive data. We are all about support, and government funding has allowed Portage to grow the level of support it provides to its national network of volunteer experts, and in turn, the researchers that they support. Again, this support is framed around the research data management lifecycle and includes a number of highly qualified personnel strategically assigned to support expert groups and other national RDM initiatives around the data lifecycle. And here's the team we have built. And if we go into their natural habitat, Zoom, this is what they look like when we play ball during the week. And we'll be meeting again later this week. From the outset, Portage focused on helping researchers and institutions meet their research data management needs. A focal point of this work has been the imminent tri-agency funders research data management policy, which has both institution-facing and researcher-facing requirements. Institutional research data management strategies are the first of these, and Portage has developed a detailed research data management strategy template with guidance to walk researchers and research groups, or sorry, campuses and institutions through that process. We've also got a newly launched data management planning assistant and a couple of national multidisciplinary repository options. The institutional RDM strategy template and associated guidance was developed by Portage. It helps institutions work through this campus-specific process by suggesting 4 main strategy components, which you can see here. The next item in the policy requirement was data management planning. And we've provided support for that through a Dmp Assistant since 2015. And I'm pleased to say that Dmp Assistant 2.0 was launched on March 3rd, 2021, based on the Digital Curation Center's DMP roadmap. The tool is national, online, and bilingual. It provides step-by-step and easy-to-use method for researchers to develop DMPs. You can update anytime and share with collaborators, output in funder-ready formats, and there's an ability to clone DMPs for similar projects. And there's also the promise of increased machine actionability, as was raised as an important point by Maria in her presentation. We've also developed a number of templates, some of which are published already within the tool. Others are coming soon, and they are bilingual as well. And we also have a number of exemplars, which are best case kinds of DMPs for researchers within particular disciplines to draw upon. Next, we have a requirement for deposit, and Portage supports this through multidisciplinary repository options, and there are 2. The first of these is Dataverse Canada, a national instance of Dataverse, run out of the Ontario Council of University Libraries Scholars Portal, partnering with Portage. over 55 participating institutions, and over 3,000 data sets to date, representing 3 terabytes and counting of data. The second repository option is a partnership with Compute Canada, and it's called FERDR, or the Federated Research Data Repository, and it is both a repository and a data discovery portal. In terms of the repository, it in limited production garnered over 150 data deposits amounting to 23 terabytes of data, so it's handling bigger data, and it was launched in full production earlier this month. As I mentioned, it's also a discovery layer. So this national discovery layer involves harvesting metadata from Canadian repositories, a wide range of them, to improve discovery of Canadian research data and metadata, to break down repository silos, to drive traffic to existing repository sites, and to create interoperability between Canadian and international platforms. And an example of this is the Open Air initiative in the European Union, where our metadata has been shared and is now discoverable to a broader international audience through Open Air. Another discovery component is Geodesy, which allows researchers to search geographically by using bounding boxes, and it brings up all the data that is represented within a particular geographic area. Looking ahead, NDRIO is in the midst of a very detailed needs assessment that includes gathering white papers from the community. So far, there were 107 white papers submitted by various stakeholders, gathering current and existing documentation from the community, and conducting a national survey of researchers. All of this will be followed up by a series of town halls scheduled for next month, and the drafting of a needs assessment report. Against this backdrop, Portage will be moving into NDRIO as part of partnering with ARC, Advanced Research Computing and Research Software. And in terms of the work for the research data management component, or Portage, we'll be looking at continued work on national coordination and support, continuing to develop and evolve platforms, tools, services, and training. And finally, identifying new projects, pilots, and initiatives based on researcher feedback. Current funding initiatives will help this feedback will help inform future initiatives related to research data management. We have 2 current initiatives already identified by the community as important. One is to improve stewardship of COVID-19 research data, so researchers will have a better chance to discover and use research done on COVID during the current pandemic. And secondly, we have a Core Trust Seal repository certification pilot, which will, for researchers, increase the availability of more trustworthy or recognized repositories for researchers seeking to deposit data and those seeking data for reuse. Looking ahead, other possible initiatives include facilitating use of persistent IDs in research, so ORCID IDs and DOIs baked into various elements of RDM, platform enhancements to achieve or help achieve trusted status, interoperable data repositories for all disciplines, and improved stewardship of sensitive data, along with a Canadian Data Champions program. There are a lot of things that we're looking forward to, and I've covered a number of them in my talk, but they include improving data discovery, developing and deploying national RDM training, growing a national network of data curation support, supporting preservation services as they grow, addressing sensitive data issues, working with domains and discipline-specific issues, promoting data management, planning, and best practices, advancing repository certification efforts in Canada, and promoting and supporting the use of persistent identifiers, as well as identifying and fostering synergies between research data management, ARC, and research software. All of this through listening to and supporting our researchers. So I'd like to give a big thanks to all of our partners in this enterprise, and turn it back over to Tess for any questions that you may have for us or the other panelists.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'd like to invite all the panelists to feel free to turn on your videos and we'll get to our first question. And if you have questions for any of the speakers, feel free to still keep putting them in the Q&A. And please feel free to upvote questions as well there. And please remember to put the presenter's name with your question as well. Thank you. So our first question is for Maria. So machine actionable DMPs and UIDs are critical to making a lot of what we do easier. But how do we get researchers excited about it?
Such a good question. And we are going to need all of your help in doing that. But I think really one of the big ways to do that is to build systems that are very much in the background, very easy to use, and don't add any burden on them, but give them some incentives for doing it by promoting their work more. So making it easier to sort of get a manifest of all of the data sets that you have published as linking to your DMP. So as a way to really demonstrate that you have good data practices and to reward researchers who demonstrate that they're responsible data stewards. So, but I think it is a culture shift. It is a big ask. From a tool builder perspective, I really focus on not making things burdensome on researchers to make it easy for them. And I try and make it so that people don't really need to know what a machine actionable data management plan is or what a PID is. They need to know what an ORCID is, but like beyond that, a lot of this stuff should function in the background and be somewhat invisible. So it's not an extra thing for them, but they actually get something in return. So I could go on for much longer, but I will leave it at that. But I love the question.
Thanks, Maria. So our next question is for Kay and Cynthia. So from Amy, and they write, many scientists are doing computational work, not just field and lab experiments, as you mentioned, Kay. I think the bar for data librarians is getting higher every day. And I wonder, did anyone's surveyed express an interest in assistance with complex computational tools such as GitHub, Docker, Jupyter, etc.?
I'll take that. I think the answer to the question is no, no one did ask about that, but we have, again, I feel like maybe we didn't necessarily give them a lot of opportunity, but we have been working to make that kind of outreach and skill building available mostly through carpentries on campus. So I agree, it's definitely something that's becoming more and more important.
Yeah, if I may, I have a bit of a follow-up question. Are there any other improvements or changes that you've made to your services based off what you learned in your surveys?
So that's a hard question to answer, because what actually the timeline of this project was Cynthia and one of her colleagues are the ones that launched that project. And I think they hired me just a couple of months before they found out the project got funded. And up to that point, there had not been a single person who was trying to, drive these efforts. And so it's hard to tease out what was the result of the project versus what was the result of other just general efforts to try to get the program up. Cynthia, do you have any insights on that?
I think, we had, up until this project, we had started to make some roadway, with the computing center on campus and starting to get those campus-wide partnerships. And I think that's definitely, actually, I know Kay has continued that work. And I think there is additional support for looking into some of the tools that were mentioned. I do think pieces of that, kind of that idea of the toolkit are happening, just not perhaps like directly to say, well, we have now developed this, thing as a result of the project. But I do know that efforts are ongoing, and there's been some stuff that has been built on top of some of the results because of that. So probably yes, and I think so. Yeah, hopefully that answers at least part of the question.
Thanks. All right, so our next question is for Jeff. You mentioned that your expert groups are built around volunteers. What is the model for sustainability of services relying on these people since they aren't paid?
Well, the main thing I would say is, and I don't want to limit the breadth and depth of stakeholder diversity, but we have a lot of librarians, and a lot of them are academic librarians. And for librarians in Canada, at least, certainly there is an element of professional practice that comes into play. This is something that they can say, I'm providing service to the community. The other piece that plays into it, I think, is just the immense hunger for assistance in this space. People have had this thrust upon them by their university librarians and said, you're now handling data management, and they may not know the first thing about it. And so from the beginning, there's been a great thirst, but there's also then been a bottom-up community-driven ownership of everything that we've accomplished, because we were doing this on a shoestring budget out of the gate. So there wasn't much national level support at that time. So over time, we built up a lot of really effective tools, services, training, all the rest. But it was time for us to provide some relief to these very busy people who are working off the sides of their desks. And that's what the national network support, the national Portage network support is providing. And we're just thrilled to be at the place we are. We do not want to see that lost, though. We need those volunteers, we need that community engagement, or we will fail miserably.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, so our next question is for Maria. And I see that you're typing an answer to provide a link for the MA-DMP webinar that's coming up. So thank you.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to send it to that person. It is for DMP tool admins, and it is filling up. So I really want to keep it just to that community, since it's pretty specific on how they're going to administer the account. But I will send it to the person who asked. But in general, if you're interested in attending, you're not a DMP tool admin, just send me an email, and we can work it out. But we've got a lot of folks attending already, so I don't want to have any admins not be able to attend. So
sounds good. And before you off the hook, Maria, there's another question here about is the idea that machine actionable DMPs would integrate or push data from other university systems, such as awards or personnel, HR data, et cetera?
Yeah, that's totally one use case. And I've talked to some universities who were interested in using it in that manner. The idea of machine actionable DMPs is that they could integrate with any related system. So there are use cases where maybe a grants office, so that they have an idea of all of the outstanding DMPs and projects that are coming down the pike, and their responsibilities that they've committed to as far as stewarding that data and making it available. So it's definitely one use case. There's a lot of others, but that's a good one for sure.
Thanks. All right, so we've got about 4 minutes left. So another question for Jeff. Could folks outside Canada listen in on some of these NDRIO development meetings? A few folks on Discord have suggested that groups of US institutions might be able to emulate some of the coordination Portage and the NDRIO or NDRIO are working towards.
That's a great question, and thanks for that, Jonathan. The actual internal NDRIO discussions, I would argue, no, you're probably not going to be invited to those, but there will be some public-facing NDRIO discussions. And by the way, NDRIO is just a placeholder name. They're going to change the name. DRI, there's some people who are saying it should be called Canada Dry. Anyway, I don't know. We'll see. But for the moment, NDRIO is still spinning up operations and such. And so I would think that if you keep an eye open, there are certainly Portage webinars that have been going out, and they describe in some measure some of the work that's been happening within the network. I imagine NDRIO is going to be pushing out some things that are describing in a more fulsome way how the three components are fitting together. So just keep your eyes open on the NDRIO website, which is engagedri.ca. I'll pop that into the chat, and we'll go from there. And watch Portage as well. I'll put both links into the chat.
Thanks. So I did have a question about links in documents from Katie. I'm not sure which presenter you're referring to, but we are going to be sharing the slides with links in the OSF site with all attendees once that OSF site is out and up. So you'll be able to access all those links at that time as well. And I think that is about, we are almost out of time for questions. So if there's the last one that you want to put in, now is the time. Maria, do you want to quickly give a verbal answer to how to become a DMP tool admin?
Sorry, I did not mean to push the, I didn't mean to push the I want to answer it live button. Anyway, yeah, so if you want to be a DMP tool admin, easiest way is shoot me an email and I can set you up. That is usually attached to the person who administers the DMP tool account at their institution. So there's no limit to the number of admins one can have, but they're usually the ones tasked with managing the DMP tool account, creating guidance, specific templates, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I don't seem to be able to push something to, unless it goes. The chat seems to only go to panelists. So I'm just wondering if somebody else could push the two.
I will, yeah, I will
Thanks.
Copy those links for you, Jeff.
Thanks.
All right, so that brings us to the end of the session, the top of the hour. But I would encourage you to continue these conversations on Discord, and links are in the chat and on the Zoom links document. And to continue these top conversations on Twitter as well, hashtag RDAP21. So thank you to our presenters, Maria, Cynthia, Kay, and Jeff. And I'm seeing a lot of thank yous pouring in. But stick around on this Zoom room. We'll be back in 10 minutes with our next panel on meeting community needs after a word from our sponsors.
Figshare is an easy-to-use research data repository system that allows academics to make all of their research outputs available in a citable, shareable, and discoverable manner. It also allows research data managers to manage the curation of files, keep account of their institution's research outputs, and measure the impact of those outputs. You can quickly and easily upload any file on Figshare, from PDFs, papers, and datasets to code, 3D printable files, and video. You control the ownership, the storage, the DOIs, the licenses, and the metadata. And we take care of the rest. Figshare is an easy-to-use research data repository system that allows academics to make all of their research outputs available in a citable, shareable, and discoverable manner. It also allows research data managers to manage the curation of files, keep account of their institution's research outputs, and measure the impact of those outputs. You can quickly and easily upload any file on Figshare, from PDFs, papers, and datasets to code, 3D printable files, and video. You control the ownership, the storage, the DOIs, the licenses, and the metadata. And we take care of the rest.
Hi, and welcome back, everybody, to our next panel session, which is panel number 4. And to start it off, I will hand off the mic to our moderator, Kim.
Thanks, Reed. So thank you for attending panel 4. The title for the panel is Meeting Community Needs. I'm sure you all know this by now, but for those of you who are just tuning in, this is a Zoom webinar. Attendees are muted, your cameras are turned off. To ask a question, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and please include the name of the presenter that your question is for. The session will run from 10:10 a.m. to 11:10 a.m. Pacific time, which is 1:10 p.m. for those of us on the East Coast. And then the last 15 minutes of the session will be for Q&A with all of the presenters. We have a Discord server set up for more informal conversations running throughout the summit. Please feel free to continue the discussion or conversation on that platform. The Research Data Access and Preservation Summit organizers are committed to providing an environment where all attendees can participate fully in the program and activities without fear of harassment or discriminatory behavior of any kind. There are code of conduct helpers available during this session, Amy Yarnell or Laura Lelligdon, who you may contact if you need assistance. So first off in the session, we're going to hear from Elisa Bathrod, Nuri Lee, and Sandy Herbio from McGill University. So whoever's speaking first wants to go ahead and share your screen.
Great, thank you. So we'll jump right in. So I'm Elisa, I'm the Research Data Management Specialist at McGill. I'm gonna let my co-presenters introduce themselves. Go ahead, Nuri.
Hello, my name is Nuri. I am one of the Engineering and Physical Sciences Librarians at McGill University.
And I'm Sandy, and I'm a Humanities and Social Sciences Liaison Librarian, also at McGill University.
And we're going to talk about developing a new RDM instruction curriculum at McGill through the library in the fall of 2020, totally virtually. So we're going to do a short land acknowledgement to acknowledge the land on which we are connecting from here in Montreal, which is adjacent to McGill or close enough to McGill that it will be our reference. And then we'll give a little bit of background about the context going into the development of these training sessions, workshops, curriculum. I think they could all be called one of those things. And then how we collaborated. So I'm a functional specialist at the library with research data management, with liaisons in specific areas to develop this content that's more approachable and accessible for a variety of disciplines. And specifically how we adapted to the online Zoom environment and some kind of the specific elements that we chose for our training that worked well on Zoom, which is the platform we used. And then we'll talk a little bit about the lessons learned, so some specific takeaways that we have. So just to begin, again, from where we're connecting from, which is McGill University or close to McGill, it's situated on the unceded traditional lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange for many First Nations. We recognize and respect the Kanien'kehá:ka as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters within the Montreal community. So for some context, we last fall, of course, most of us pivoted to a sort of online environment, and we went fully online with the commitment to going online in the fall. So we knew that kind of far in advance that all courses would be online in the fall and this winter as well. And we actually had a pretty high attendance for the workshops that the library were offering that moved online, so higher than we would have had in person. And so we wanted to really build on that momentum for fall 2020. And so that, that meant that we had to develop all these workshops from the ground up at the end of summer over the course of a few weeks to get it ready to launch in October. And that's also because I started in June at McGill, so we didn't have so much time. And this was a totally new training. We hadn't really offered RDM training at McGill, you know, totally open to the whole community or the public before. And we also, for some context, have medical institutes and research hospitals affiliated with McGill. So our training has to sort of also take into account that we have hospital users who may participate. So in the end, we ended up developing 3 core virtual workshops. So, you know, introduction to RDM, one on data management planning using the Portage Dmp Assistant that Jeff Moon mentioned in the last session, and a third workshop on more in-depth RDM topics such as sensitive data and more in-depth about metadata, for example. And then we developed 2 specialized virtual workshops, one on open data publishing and one on social sciences and humanities issues with RDM. And these were also open to the public for the first time. So we didn't necessarily advertise it widely, but anyone could sign up, and we did have some non-McGill community members attend the workshops as well. And Nuri is going to do this slide. Go ahead, Nuri.
All right, so I started over at McGill at 2018. Formerly, I was at Purdue University. And one of the things I really wanted to take away from my experiences working there was around research data management. And so I was hoping to bring the knowledge I gained from there and the experiences I had there over to my role as a liaison for engineering and physical sciences. It hadn't really existed at McGill prior to me arriving there. And so I really tried to start integrating that type of work with at least my groups in hopes that, you know, eventually we would end up with Elisa, our RDM person later on. So when I had started working at McGill, I had worked with a couple of engineering research groups where the PI basically wanted to create a workflow and train all of their researchers to be able to adhere to this workflow for the group. So anything around research data management, so how they're doing their file keeping, what kind of folders they should have, where it would go to, you know, consistency, things like that. And so I had started creating a workshop for these research groups where I would do some training based on different exercises that would relate to the type of work they do so that they would have a better idea of what it really means to do RDM within their own workflows. And then eventually I whittled that down a little bit more for Science Literacy Week, where I was asked to do some sort of introduction to data management just for the greater community. And so again, that also tied into activities that are more relatable for the average person. So maybe things like, naming their files like images or, Word documents that they have day to day. And then these kind of translated and ended up being the scaffolding for our workshop series that we're presenting about.
Okay, great. And that leads into the collaboration that we built. So as Elisa mentioned, she started at McGill in June 2020. So before that, we didn't have a dedicated research management specialist. But there has been, as Nuri mentioned, a growing need for that and desire from researchers and students. So what we did in the past is I knew that Nuri had all this great content and expertise, and I saw a need arise in political science as they're developing more and more research with quantitative data particularly, but not necessarily the knowledge to manage that data. So Nuri and I partnered to offer a research data management session for political science specifically. That was last year in the spring of 2020, just before we had to close down because of COVID. And then when Elisa joined us, we were very fortunate to be able to work with her to build this collaboration, which has been so far a research data management specialist, engineering librarian, and humanities and social sciences librarian. So the goal of the partnership is really to build a holistic curriculum that would be relevant to different disciplines. So whether you're in sciences, health sciences, social sciences, you can still take away something from this. And we've had interest in other people interested in joining the group since then.
So adapting to online specifically, one of our focus was to incorporate interactive elements, which I think, is the key, probably what everyone has been working on as well. So we debated very specifically things like Zoom poll versus Padlet versus poll everywhere. So we needed we wanted to build in exercises that would allow for sort of open-ended response, so people to share ideas and not just to respond to a quantitative poll like a Zoom poll. And we also needed them to be anonymous to sort of help people feel comfortable and not awkward about sharing their thoughts, or not to feel judged. So we looked at Padlet, which is sort of a tool that allows you to create like these sticky notes type responses, and it pins them to a board. And so it looks pretty cool, but we found that moving from Zoom to Padlet and back to Zoom, the learning curve was a bit high. It wasn't very intuitive. And we had a few folks complain that they weren't tech savvy enough for that application. So we moved to Poll Everywhere, which is what many of our librarians share. So we share one paid account, which means that we have a common calendar on our intranet where we schedule days and times when we want to use it. And it allows you to sort of create different style surveys and see results come in live, and it can be anonymous.
So we ended up using one of our exercises as part of the activities with Poll Everywhere, and we had integrated it into PowerPoint so that people didn't have to, monitor their browser to be able to see what types of answers were coming up. And we also chose this again for the anonymous answers that people could give, especially when it's going to be a group of people that are from very different disciplines who may not have been exposed to the idea of data management before. So it gave them kind of a maybe a more comfortable space for them to be able to answer us.
And we also included jokes. I put that here not to be facetious, but so I can't tell you a specific RDM joke, but it's more that, to keep the atmosphere lighthearted and to make people feel like engaged. We try to joke around with each other. So having multiple co-presenters was really key in sort of keeping that tone. We debated recording or not. We ended up not recording any of our sessions, and we're still not sure. Actually, we'd be happy to discuss this with other folks who have been doing this kind of training to see what your thoughts are. In the end, we wanted to encourage discussion, and we were afraid that recording might dissuade people from, interrupting with questions during the session or volunteering information. So that's why we decided not to record, but we're still debating this. And then our one key element for moving this to online that made it successful is having multiple presenters, and even 3, so even more than 2, we found was really successful. So we had someone manage the chat, someone manage the waiting room, and we were able to juggle a lot of things simultaneously and fit all the content into 1 hour, partially because we weren't doing all these administrative tasks ourselves while also trying to teach. So I'll just show you quickly what it looks like, the Poll Everywhere tool. So this is what the user would see when they click the link. So you get like a single link, and this is why, since we're sharing an account, we have to manage who's activating a poll at a given time. And so you can see we had a question at the beginning of our intro RDM workshop just to do an icebreaker. And so you can see in real time results coming in, and you can scroll through the results. And so we would share our screen, and one of us would share our screen and the other person would switch back to the presentation, which facilitated, which made it more efficient. This is the file naming conventions exercise that we included. So we had people go to Poll Everywhere to answer this question on how they would name this file. This is Chopin Nuri's dog, and this is just a shameless plug to show her cute dog, but also a really good exercise because his name is Chopin, which, if you think through naming a file, the nice thing that this demonstrates is that you don't know that if Chopin is a dog or a composer. So, that's one of the layered elements in this example that, it's not quite so obvious just from the image. So we ask them to name this file. We talk about how everyone has different approaches to naming files. Then we teach them about file naming conventions, and we have them do it again after having more information. And the nice thing about this example is that it really shows that even when you learn about file naming conventions and you have a lot of context, people are still going to come up with different ways to name the same file. And so it kind of demonstrates that having a data management plan from the get-go with like a strategy for file naming conventions, especially for groups, is really key. And this is an exercise that takes about 5 minutes out of a 1-hour workshop, basically.
Okay, so one of the elements that we mentioned is that we really wanted to have and support a holistic curriculum. So not only in terms of the different fields or areas that this could support, but also in terms of like the documentation and everything we made available to the participants. So obviously they could attend the workshops, but we also had supporting documents that they could rely on afterwards, like a LibGuide, for example, that we'll show you in a moment. But this could also be used as a support for liaison librarians, because a lot of them don't necessarily have RDM training or may not be super comfortable with it. So all of the different sections can help researchers, but also librarians. And we can just go back to the previous one. So this is an example of our LibGuide, for example. But yes, so we've had those. We've also created some training sessions for librarians specifically, just so they can know at least the basics of RDM in their area. And also we are trying to look at ways to scale this up once we're able to go back to in-person instruction. And we're thinking of the different ways because we're, as Elisa said, a little bit victim of our success, that we have sometimes workshops that have 40 or 50 participants, and given the size of our in-person classrooms, it would not be possible for them to hold all these people. So we're looking at a hybrid model of maybe online and in person to scale this up a little bit.
Okay, so we have a couple minutes left. I'm just going to go over the lessons learned. One big key takeaway is that this ended up sort of snowballing into further collaboration. We had another liaison sort of join our group to help us come up with 2 additional workshops, a really digital humanities focused workshop and a workshop on OSF. And then we have a few more in the pipeline. So I've had some contacts with other liaisons who are now interested in this. So it's sort of like peer pressure works through liaisons, which made it very successful. So I would say that I would not have had the success as an RDM person if I hadn't collaborated with Sandy and Nuri and, been able to demonstrate that that collaboration works well. We also Okay, I have 1 minute. I'm gonna make it. And one thing that we still struggling with is that people want to discuss their own data, and we don't want to have a super long session. Like, we don't want to make a workshop more than an hour or even 90 minutes, because, you know, then the attendance drops, the feasibility for people to find time in their schedule for that drops. But an hour is really a short amount of time to cover a lot of content. So, you know, there's this trade-off of like, do we cover the content or do we leave even 10 minutes for discussion? And that's been really hard for us, and we don't have a very good solution at, you know, right now. We might think about doing sort of like drop-in hours right following the workshop so that people could come back into a group and talk about their data. And then here's the unpopular lesson, is that the virtual format is maybe the ideal format for scalability for this type of workshop. We did a couple of these during Love Data Week this year, and we had like almost 100 attendees in one of the workshops. And that, you know, was like community members and people who normally wouldn't have the time to come trek across campus to an in-person workshop. So it makes them much more accessible, and it just makes it easier for people to co-present a workshop pretty seamlessly. Whereas in person, if 3 of us were standing in front of a classroom, you know, we could do it, but I think it's more ideal in this format. Okay, I'm wrapping up. And then the other specific thing is that we built into the training issues related to conducting research online. So that's what made this very timely. So thinking about very specific questions like, what software can you use to conduct virtual interviews, and consenting people virtually, etc. And that's it, we're done. And then questions at the end. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Lisa, Sandy, and Nureen. Next, we're going to hear from Deb Wiltshire from the University of Essex. You can go ahead and share.
Thank you. Just bear with me. My share screen is always a little bit temperamental, so forgive me while I fumble a little bit with it. There we go. Okay, so just to introduce myself, I'm Deb Wiltshire and I'm the Data Access Services Manager, and I'm joined this evening for us actually by my colleague Alex, who is our Data Access Officer. And we are based at the UK Data Service over in the UK, and we are an archive, and we curate and make available a whole host of different data sources. So today we're just going to focus on meeting the challenges of data curation and access in lockdown. So I think this is probably the understatement of the century, really, but 2020 was a very unprecedented year in many, many ways. Over here in the UK, in the early part of 2020, in early January, news started to filter in about this new virus, which was popping up. And over sort of January, February time, it became clear that this was actually going to be something a bit more serious, that this was the start of a global pandemic. And as we all know, this pandemic has impacted on every single aspect of our life in really quite unprecedented ways. It's certainly something that I don't think many of us would have foreseen. And it's been an unprecedented year for data professionals like ourselves as well. The pandemic has sparked an even greater demand for high quality social, economic, and health data to assist our understanding not just of the virus itself, but of the social impact, social and economic impact of the pandemic. Now, the UK is very fortunate, like the US, to have a wealth of high quality data collections, which are already used widely for research. However, a pandemic is very different to normal life. So there was this groundswell need for COVID-specific data to be available. And of course, there was none. So this was really a challenge. At the same time, many of our old ways of working had to change because we, like many different countries, had to move into a remote working model, which we'd never had before. Now, we are very, very fortunate in that we've been able to make a lot of adaptations, which has enabled us to carry on, unlike many industries which have largely shut down for much of the last year. But of course, there have been challenges along the way. And one of these, of course, is that everything has been needed now. Whereas we're used to things being needed in 6 months or a year, everything that needs to happen right now. And we're not really set up for that. But the pandemic has been unfolded in real time. And so the data world has had to try and keep pace with that. But there's been a lot of rapid changes because of COVID-19, and that starts from data collection all the way through to data access. Now, the data world has reacted quickly to the pandemic, and the pace really has been extraordinary. And the challenge for all of us in this industry has been to ensure that both the data quality and data security are not compromised in the process at all. So we're going to focus our talk today about the work involved in meeting these challenges in the areas of data collection and ingest, data access and secure access. So in terms of data collection, the challenges have been obviously the speed of everything. Now, although we have a wealth of high quality data, obviously none of this is COVID specific. And all of a sudden, everybody needed this. There have been a lot of data sets that we have which do contain and collect information, which is of course very relevant. So we can use them to monitor the impact on the economy, for example. But what we couldn't do was to address the specific issues that have emerged out of the pandemic, such as the challenges for balancing homeschooling and work, the impact of furlough schemes and the job losses that may come out of that when the furlough scheme ends. We also have seen a huge increase in social isolation because for the first time in many people's lives, we've had to isolate and we've had to stay away from our usual support networks, at least in the physical world. And all of this stuff hasn't been in the existing data. Now, in the UK, we had the first stay-at-home guidance from the government issued on the 23rd of March. And I just want to take you through an example of how the surveys in the UK have reacted. So I'm going to focus on Understanding Society, which is our largest household panel survey. So it's a survey that's run annually and it interviews all people in around 40,000 households, and it follows them over a long time period. So the study team, by the 17th of April, had sent out 42,000 pre-notification letters to sample members in their panel. And at this time, they were also developing a COVID-specific survey questionnaire. By the 24th of April, just 1 week later, that questionnaire was out in the field. And that is just extraordinary. Now, I used to work for Understanding Society, so I know how long the process usually takes. It takes many, many months to design a questionnaire, test it and get it out into the field. And this has happened in just a small number of weeks. Now, obviously data collection methods have had to change. They haven't been able to do face-to-face, so everything shifted to online and telephone. And surveys like Understanding Society, who have had previously been shifting to online and telephone interviewing, kind of had a head start here, so they've been able to adapt really well. Other studies that didn't have that background, I think, have struggled a lot more. So the fieldwork period was limited to a week, and they had a 49% response rate, from those who had taken part the previous year. And then comes the joy of data cleaning, creating weights, derived variables, etc. And amazingly, all of that work was done, the data deposited with us by the 29th of May. And this, I just find this phenomenal, how the survey teams have managed to pull off such an achievement. And I'm going to hand over to Alex for the next slides.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Debs. So we've just covered how Understanding Society adapted their data collection. So we're now going to look at the challenges that some data owners have faced of ingesting data rapidly. So we're going to look at the business impact of COVID-19 survey, which is run by the UK's Office for National Statistics. So it's called BICS for short. It celebrates its first anniversary this month. I mean, whether you call that a celebration, I'm not quite sure, but it has been really successful. In that time, they've adapted the questions they ask on the survey as the pandemic has progressed, and their sample size has grown from 12,000 to 30,000. It's a voluntary survey, and it has a response rate of around 25%. Businesses are sent the survey every 2 weeks, and it uses smart routing. So the data generated include a number of blank responses for questions that aren't true blank responses. They're just there because the question wasn't asked of a respondent. The data are used to provide timely estimates to UK government, and there's a really great interest in the research community for using this particular data set. It's therefore necessary to have a really quick turnaround on the ingest of the data for researchers to use, so that there isn't too much of a lag behind result publication. The BICS team therefore send the data to the ONS Secure Research Service on the same day that they publish their results, and the data are then sent to us shortly afterwards. To ensure that we meet BICS's requirements to check that researchers' analysis doesn't conflict with their own or duplicate it in any way, we've developed a relationship with them where we can pass them project applications and they can decide whether or not the application should go ahead. Long term, with collection and ingest, we think we're going to see more demand for rapid ingest, but that we'll see more surveys using smart routing, which should help speed up the turnaround and processing times. Lovely, thank you, Debs. So we move on to the challenges of rapid access for data. We've seen great demand increase for our service, so both in terms of data access applications and data queries, so where researchers need advice on which data sets we've got available, which obviously includes a new wealth of COVID-19 related data. And we've found that queries that would normally be quite quick to answer over the phone on our help desk, because we've been working at home, we haven't been able to answer those over the phone. So everything has come through via email, which has generated a huge volume of written queries. And we've also received an increased number of data applications, particularly ones that are short in time frame, or they require prioritisation because they're relevant to UK government policy and they're COVID specific. We also run a number of training sessions throughout the year at the UK Data Service, and we've had to move some of these to online very quickly. But luckily we have a really good track record of running some types of virtual events, so it's been a fairly straightforward process for us to do this. And it's also introduced us to new software for delivering training, and it's actually enhanced what we can offer to researchers during those training sessions. So we move on to secure access, which is a progression from the last slide. And the closure of academic institutions during lockdown meant many researchers were not able to access secure data, which are only available under strict conditions. But we reacted really quickly to this and negotiated new access pathways with data owners, which enabled that policy changing research to continue and be prioritised. Part of the secure access application process is mandatory attendance on safe research training. So it's an integral part of the application process, and it was really important that was one of the priorities that we made, getting that onto online, because it was previously a face-to-face course. And we didn't want restrictions to delay researchers any more than they had already been delayed. So we adapted the training to move online.
Okay, I think we've lost Alex, so I will take over. Bear with me. Yes, so training, we've been able to adapt to a virtual course, and it took us just 2 weeks after the first lockdown started. That has brought about its own challenges, really, because we've had to develop a safe process for checking attendees' IDs for this particular course. But again, we've adapted quickly, and we've implemented a safe process for researchers to send us copies of their IDs in advance, which we can then check against their faces using webcam. And then we can securely delete these from our system. Now, long term, we think we're going to see greater demand for access outside of institutional settings, including some international data access requests, which haven't really been permitted previously before COVID. So the challenge for us now moving forward is going to be to work with data owners again to try and find a way of meeting this demand in a formalized and safe way. So in terms of what we've learned, I think the thing that I'm really happy about is we've learned we're good at what we do. And it's not very often that we actually take the time to reflect on that. But I think we've done a really good job, and the survey teams and the data owners have also done a fantastic job. So we've learned that we can move quickly and we can be adaptive, and that's wonderful. The caveat, I would say, is whether we can keep up the pace long term. I think everybody, you know, speaking to survey teams and data owners and my colleagues, we all feel a little bit frayed around the edges, and we probably all benefit from a bit of a break. Thank you, Kim. So, you know, we probably can't move at this pace forever, but certainly it has shown us that there is scope to speed up the processes. So that's a very sort of localized thing, learning. In terms of what we've learned as a society, I think, through the research that we've been able to facilitate, I think a lot of research this last 12 months has really highlighted the health inequalities that exist, certainly in the UK amongst different groups in society. It's also brought mental health to the fore, which is something in the UK we've really not done very well in the past. And it's also raised some important ethical issues, and there's been a lot of interesting discussions around data ethics and ethical concerns around things such as the test and trace system. And I think this is really going to shape discussions and debates going forward. And I've just put mine and Alex's contact details there, and I think we're on time, which is good. So obviously any questions after the last presentations?
Thank you, Deborah. And I hope Alex has made it back. I'm not sure.
I have, thank you.
You have, okay. And I want to and I want to apologize, Alex, for not including your name at the beginning during the introduction. Our final presenter for this panel will be Sarah Norris from the John C. Hitt Library at the University of Central Florida.
Thank you so much, Kim. And hopefully you should be seeing my slides. If there's any challenges, let me know. I see a yes, that's a great sign. Excellent. So thank you so much for having me present today. I'm really looking forward to talking a bit about the different projects and activities that we have undertaken, particularly this last year at the University of Central Florida Libraries. Today, we're going to be focusing primarily on adapting resources for our researchers with a particular emphasis on social justice and COVID-19 research. And though I'm presenting solo today, I do want to acknowledge my colleagues who have not only contributed to this presentation today, but who have also led and facilitated many of the projects and activities that I'm going to talk about in this presentation. And I know that some of them are in today's session, so I hope that they'll chime in the chat as well. And of course, they're excellent resources for discussion for these kinds of projects that we worked on. Before we talk about some of the specific projects, I do want to give a bit of context about the university itself broadly, and then also about UCF libraries and the data support through our library. So as you can see, we are one of 12 public universities in the state of Florida. We make up that state university system. We are quite large, as you can see also by this slide deck, and actually this number is a bit out of date right now. We've actually moved beyond 70,000 students. This is numbers from 2019. So we are an extremely large research institution. In Florida, we are both centrally located in the state and also a bit centrally located in Orlando, sort of the land of Disney, if you are familiar with that. And so because of where we're located, we really do engage in a lot of innovation and industry. And because of that, we have ranked as the top 20 most innovative universities in the United States. And of course, the need for research and data support is really critical and growing as we continue to grow. With this in mind, data support through UCF libraries in some respects is a bit of grassroots effort. And I say that really in the vein that we don't have any formal data librarians within the library. So we don't have any dedicated positions, but certainly data is something that many of us are deeply engaged in. And so most of us have data related areas that are aligned with our positions, but we're not specifically fully dedicated to data support. So perhaps our subject librarians who provide data support there, our digital initiatives librarian who assists with data management plans. So we all have a bit of a piece. With that in mind, we've really come together in the last couple of years, just sort of understanding that we all have different perspectives and expertise. So we really wanted to make sure that we worked both consciously and intentionally together to support research and data related needs at our institution. With that in mind, as I said, we formed a small working group. So this group continues to grow and evolve, and I'm sure it will over time. It currently is composed of several subject librarians in our STEM disciplines, so our science and engineering librarian, myself as the ScholComm librarian, and our digital initiatives librarian. We originally sort of unofficially call ourselves a STEAM working group because we launched a workshop series of the same title that was focused on data in 2019, but of course, I'm sure that will continue to grow and evolve. We do work with some key campus partners, and these are a few that we've worked with really critically over the last year or so. Our graduate research and information technology unit has been a really excellent partner, and that's going to play into some of the projects that we engaged in this past year. So of course, and I just briefly mentioned this before, but our activities, as I said, the working group developed over time because we were doing a lot of things concurrently, whether it was sort of the subject specific support or internal professional development or broad workshops. So it was a real natural fit for all of us to come together, and it's really impacted the different kinds of activities that we can engage in and really increase the data support that we can provide to our researchers. So now that we have a bit of that context at play, I'm going to talk a bit about some of the projects that we engaged in this last year. The first is related to COVID-19 and public health data. And as our UK constituents mentioned, this last year was unprecedented, and certainly the need for immediate and transparent public health and data information really came to the fore. Both at the institution level and at the libraries, we really aim to provide data support and information to aid in research on the public health crisis, again, at UCF and broadly. And like many of your institutions, we also had a COVID-19 dashboard. We still do, and this provides data and statistics, particularly about cases. It's helped us a lot with contact tracing and other issues, as well as, of course, contributed broadly to research, both at the institution and then broadly. With this in mind, UCF Libraries also really wanted to make sure that we address COVID-19 resources and data in particular throughout this process. So we developed an academic resources, a research guide, And while, of course, you can see on this screen, it does have a lot of the more common things that our researchers might be looking for through the library, such as how do you access things remotely, or how do you utilize temporary access materials. We also wanted to make sure that we included information directly related to COVID-19 research, specifically at the state, national, and international level. Promoting diversity, inclusion, equity, and access in a seamless and transparent way is an imperative that we, particularly as information professionals, strive to achieve. 2020 illustrated the need for this more so than ever, broadly as a community, but also within the support needs for our institution. So it was important for us to acknowledge the current landscape, but to also incorporate that actively and explicitly in our activities and resources that we provided our researchers. So with this in mind, UCF Libraries undertook several projects that highlighted data and general research support, in particular for social justice activities. And this included both faculty-driven projects and library-led activities. I want to highlight one of our faculty-driven collaborations, which was initiated by our School of Public Administration and facilitated by one of our subject librarians in social sciences. Corinne Bishop, who's our subject librarian, has been working with SPA and other departments on a variety of new programs and certificates. And so this project really dovetailed nicely into the work that they were already doing. As a part of the public administration program, a real key focus is to prepare students to manage and design government and nonprofit services that supports and aims the social justice and awareness of the issues surrounding access and equity within the profession. So with this in mind, the public administration reached out to our subject librarian to develop a social justice research guide based on ideas and input from a faculty committee. And of course, Corinne and others are going to provide additional guidance as this guide continues to develop and evolve. One of the primary goals was to identify resources related to social justice available through UCF Libraries. It brings together resources from the library's collections and data resources associated with the issues of diversity and inclusion, environmental justice, gender and racial disparities, and the intersection of these topics with policy and society. And you can see here, this is a screenshot of the guide. It's currently live, so you can take a look at it if you're interested. It was launched just this last month, and of course, will continue to grow and evolve, as I mentioned, based on feedback from SPA faculty and researchers. And of course, the guide itself includes a variety of resources, and data resources in particular are included in a variety of different ways. So not only just in the tabs that you see here on various topics, but also within a broader social sciences data tab. So in addition to the faculty collaborations that I highlighted, UCF Libraries also undertook several projects on data support with an emphasis on social justice. And the first of that was a series of workshops on the foundations of data management. This is a 3-part workshop series that was a part of a larger research, computing, and data workshop series that we collaborated with on through our graduate and research IT, which I mentioned that unit before, and it's been an excellent partner and helped really increase the attendance and awareness of the data services that we can provide to our researchers, and also our advanced research computing centers. Those are really great collaboration project. They've helped develop a lot of data services throughout our institution. We're now participating in the Carpentries program, and 2 of our librarians through this partnership are now trained on Carpentries workshops, which is really fantastic. So the first session that we did here was virtual. You can see the screenshot as finding data sources. And so we not only provided a general introduction to data sources in particular, but also data concepts. And we really highlighted things related to COVID-19 and social justice, really tying into current events and areas of strong interest to our attendees. And then other sessions that we've done have also included DMP and FAIR practices and maximizing the impact of your data post-publication. And all of those will highlight examples related to public health and social justice. UCF Libraries is also deeply engaged in open access and took the opportunity this past year to really reflect and re-envision several open access resources to not only incorporate more open data, but also to highlight resources related to activism and social justice. The first of these projects was redesigning our existing LibGuide, our research guide. We did that in the summer, and then we launched it during Open Access Week in October. Our humanities librarian, John Benasek, really developed the activism and social justice components of this guide, including adding data resources related to a variety of social justice efforts. And it's something that's going to continue to grow and evolve. And in fact, even just attending this summit, I've learned of some new resources that we want to add to that guide, which is really fantastic. And here's a screenshot of the guide itself with some of the various areas for which we've provided some resource support and some general context for the guide itself. As I said, the launch of the research guide really culminated with Open Access Week and our celebration locally at UCF. The broader theme of Open Access Week internationally this past year was Open with Purpose, taking action to build structural equity and inclusion. And we felt that was particularly timely and relevant to the projects and the current social and political climate. So UCF Libraries incorporated the theme into a series of virtual activities that we undertook. So we did some blog posts and social media posts. We had a research guide. We did some quizzes, lots of virtual ways that they could engage. And it incorporated issues of social justice in connection to the open access movement with an emphasis on primary sources. I see 3 minutes. Excellent. I should be wrapping up soon. Thank you, Kim. And that may be used as data points and other data resources available to researchers. So again, pulling all of these things together. Our blog post series included an excellent article by our humanities librarian, really providing context for the newly updated open access research guide and highlighted some different contemporary and timely resources for researchers to explore. Another blog post featured an interview with an instructor in the Games and Interactive Media program, addressing equity and access in the digital humanities. This post not only explored the instructor's research emphasis, but also highlighted perspectives and insights on data use in the digital humanities, the importance of open data, and provided data resources for researchers to explore, such as the 2020 publication, Data Feminism. So wrapping up, as UCF Libraries looks to support data in 2021 and beyond, our activities and efforts in the past year really serve as a launching point for continued conversation and engagement in data services and resources around topics such as diversity and inclusion, public health, and cultural issues related to race, ethnicity, gender, and identity. We aim to continue to develop our grassroots efforts into more formal activities and continue to refine and revision the ways that libraries support data in a multitude of ways. And so with that, thank you so much. I look forward to any questions that you have. And of course, please feel free to reach out to myself and to my colleagues if you'd like to discuss any of our projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so again, go ahead and put any questions that you have for the speakers into the Q&A. I think some of them have been answered in the Q&A, but we'll read them out loud. So in case people haven't been watching the Q&A questions and answers, everybody can hear what has been asked and answered so far. But first, let's see, Heather Shyman asks Alyssa, Nuri, and Sandy, how did you promote the workshops to different audiences, like students, faculty, librarians, and community members? Did you get mostly graduate students at the workshops, or was there research staff, faculty, undergraduates? What was the population?
So Nuri and Sandy, I can let you talk about how you advertise to your liaison areas.
Sure, I can start. How our groups, I guess a lot of institutions, is that I'm part of kind of our STEM group. So we have physical sciences, engineering, health sciences, life sciences as a group together. And a lot of times when we have workshops or things that we think are relevant to the other groups, we'll share that announcement along to our colleagues. And the issue with RDM is that we've gotten a lot of questions regarding RDM from a variety of disciplines in STEM and health sciences. And because our librarians were already aware that these questions were floating about, it just made it easier that when I made the announcement that these workshops were happening, that they just sent it out to all of their faculty, their associates, their students. And so we got a lot of different branches of that side coming into the workshops.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I sent it out to all the humanities and social sciences librarian so they could share with different departments for whom it would be relevant. Like if you're in psychology, for example, this is something that probably had a lot of value to them. So we've done that. We also have a fantastic comms team at McGill, which will very often look at all the workshops that are listed on the website and promote them through the social media channels that we have. So they did that as well.
Yeah, so to answer the question about who attended, I think it was a mix. Actually, we had a pretty good mix of students at the undergraduate, graduate level, research staff, and faculty across most of the workshops. Another thing that I did is that I've been working to develop collaborations and partnerships with our hospital affiliates that they're promoting open science. So they in often cases have an open science officer or a person who's designated trying to promote open science within those institutes. So I worked with those particular people to sort of have them spread the word on our behalf. And then I also had our Office of Sponsored Research send out the announcement on their listserv as well. So it was multiple like admin units and through the liaison channels as well.
Great, thank you. This question is for Deb and Alex from Tina Griffin. They ask, while there may have been room to accelerate data management processes in various stages, what were some of the specific trade-offs or costs that had to be made regarding other routine work? And where do you anticipate friction as you review where a new operations model as the pandemic lessens?
I think for my role, a lot of the things that have been pushed aside are the occasional tasks. So the development of some new training sessions or workshops I've put on hold. So we focus just on those training sessions that are immediately necessary. So a lot of what I would be doing has been shelved for now. It's difficult because as we face more pressure in certain areas, other areas have died down a little bit. So it's roughly balanced for me in the role that I do. Alex, I don't know how the experiences is for you.
Yeah, I would say it's probably around the same, that it's just the value added tasks that are really important, sort of strategically, that have just had to fall by the wayside in the pursuit of completing the core tasks. And also the core tasks have taken longer. So our turnaround times for answering queries have increased from 3 working days to 5 working days. And application turnaround times for those that aren't priority applications is longer as well. In terms of the friction for the future, that's a tricky one, because I'm not sure really whether we see any internal friction coming, in as much as the pandemic's actually given us the opportunity to really identify where there are gaps in our systems, where we really need to make improvements. So that's given us the space to actually, think, oh, actually we do need to end-to-end process review. How do we change this part of the system so that this part of the process is quicker, which will benefit us and researchers in the end of it? I think the bits that we will probably find friction with are with external factors. So where we were talking about, data owners have historically not been open to the idea of, say, international access, but there is now going to be that greater demand for it. So we are going to have to play that middle role between the researcher demand and what the data owner wants. I think that's probably going to be our main area of friction. Would you agree, Debs?
I think so, because I think everybody has a different tolerance for change, and we've seen a real difference in our data owners. So some are very open and very forward thinking, and that COVID has really just pushed them down a path that they were wanting to travel anyway. It's just sped that journey up. Others, as Alex mentioned, are really not that comfortable. So this is, I think for them, it's going to be perhaps a slightly trickier journey. And we will have to play our part in smoothing that journey, I think. It's difficult because we don't really yet know what the long-term impact will be. So we're trying to plan for what we think will happen. If we get that wrong, then obviously that's going to be some friction there. I hope we haven't, but time will tell.
Great, thank you. Sarah, we have a question for you from Amy Koshofer. She says, I was interested in the job title, Digital Initiative Librarian. Do you have data management put into all job descriptions, or does this librarian have this as a primary responsibility? And I realize this is a bit off of the topic of your presentation, but I was exploring your organization chart and trying to see how the STEAM team was connected in the units.
Those are great questions. So the first one, and I don't know if Lee Dotson, who's our digital initiative librarian, is actually in the session right now, but I know she was planning on it. So Lee is our digital initiatives librarian, and she is, I would say, in some respects, the librarian who's most responsible for data management in her job description. Most data management is going to be addressed in our library through our digital initiatives. It's technology solutions and digital initiatives. We just had a name change. And so Lee is the interim head of that right now, and she would be facilitating that. We also have our institutional repository within that unit, so she manages quite a bit of the data management and sources there. So I hope that answers that a little bit. Also, in terms of job descriptions, it is not in any of our other job descriptions as a requirement. And then as far as the org chart, so I guess this is a great thing because it shows that in our library, we're not particularly siloed. We really try to keep open communication and engagement on certain areas. And so a lot of the folks who are in the STEAM team are from a variety of different units within our org chart. So if you're looking at the org chart, both myself as the scholarly communication and our subject librarians are a part of our research, education, and engagement division. And so we're all under one umbrella. And then our digital initiatives librarian is under, as I said, technology solutions and digital initiatives. So another unit. We also pull in other librarians occasionally from, say, our acquisitions and cataloging unit for metadata expertise. So we really do try to pull folks from different parts of our org chart to collaborate on data support.
Great, thank you. So I see that it is 2:10 here, which means that is the end of the session. Thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you to the audience for participating in this session. We're going to be taking a 10-minute break now, and as a reminder, there's going to be a new link for the next session. So this one will close, and then we'll go to the next link on the schedule. Okay, thank you very much.